don't know what to do without a script.
You need a script to chair this committee.
The Economics Matters Committee is now open, and I guess we'll take attendance.
Please note for the record, all committee members are present.
Thank you. It's been one of those days. And the only item on the agenda, well, first we'll start with approval of the minutes, but we don't have any minutes because this is our first meeting,
Well, we have,
right?
The two joint committee
Oh,
minutes.
okay, okay,
do you have the correct agenda?
yeah,
It has joint committee.
yeah, you're right.
I'll move to approval of the minutes for both January 30th and February 6th, the joint committee meeting.
Second?
All in favor of approving the committees, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approval of the minutes passed, thank you. Now, we'll look at 0418, which is the plumbing code updates and amendments for the purpose of adopting the International Plumbing Code, prohibiting underground use of foam core waistlines and matters generally relating to updating and amending Chapter 17.28 of the Code of the City of Annapolis. I've invited John here from Planning and Zoning Department to speak to it. Would you like to go ahead?
Good afternoon. I'm John Manasseh, Chief of Code Enforcement, Department of Planning and Zoning. In the first reader for this particular ordinance change, I think it was mentioned that we're actually changing the plumbing code, which I wanted to correct and make sure everybody's aware. This is actually not a change in the plumbing code. The first item on our list is actually just changing the title of the section. So it's a little less dramatic than maybe it sounded at first glance, because in 2017 we adopted the International Plumbing Code, which was a change, but we left the title of the section National Standard Plumbing Code. So the code's still the same for now and for the foreseeable future, but we just needed to correct that because there are some references where contractors go in and see 17.28.020 and see National Standard Plumbing Code and just jump from there when it's really the International Plumbing Code. So the first change on our list is just changing the name of the section. The code is not actually changing.
Okay.
The two things that we are looking to actually add as amendments to the code are what you mentioned, the foam core waistlines, not permitted for underground uses. And to explain what a foam core waistline is, there are a variety of different types of piping that can be used to convey waste out of a building. For the longest time, the plumbing inspector insisted on it being like a cast iron pipe. We relaxed that, over the past couple years, and started accepting whatever the plumbing code said for permitted pipe. But we did run into the foam core pipe for an underground use we don't feel is really appropriate. So what we want to do with this amendment is sort of take that out of what's available to the plumbing contractors. And a foam core pipe, what it is, if you think of like an inner lining, which is a PVC style material, then it has a foam layer around that, and then a second wall of PVC pipe. So because it's like a double layer, they make the layers of the PVC piping much thinner than what you would get if you just had standard Schedule 40 PVC pipe, which is acceptable. The standard wall of the PVC pipe, when it's Schedule 40, is much thicker. It's more durable. And when you use this foam core piping underground, we feel like it's like an inferior product because if you use a snake to clean those lines out if they have a clog, they're more susceptible to damage because they're such a thin wall on the pipe. And the expense, what we're actually trying to do is protect homeowners, business owners that go through the expense of putting in underground pipe. We don't want them to use an inferior product just because the code allows it. And what we're trying to do is say, we don't want to see the underground piping in that foam core, because if it's damaged, you're going to be replacing it. And then you're going to have a more costly expense that you never really anticipated, because you didn't know that the pipe was like actually sort of weaker and doesn't stand up well to mechanical clearing devices like a snake. For inside of the building, we don't object to that because it's merely, taking off a wall finish and replacing it if it's damaged in some way. So inside of a wall is not an issue for us. It's just the underground use. Secondly, the manufacturer states that the piping isn't designed to be used where there's pressure involved. And one of the things we understand is that the minute you put a pipe in the ground and put dirt on top of it, there's a pressure applied. Now, it's not inside the pipe. This is pressure from the outside, which can actually deform it. And this isn't clear in the manufacturer's documentation that says whether the pressure is supposed to be inside or outside, that it's inappropriate. It just says pressure. So we have to sort of use common sense. If dirt's going to compress the pipe and make it look oval, it's certainly not holding up to pressure the way a standard cast iron or PVC, like a Schedule 40 PVC pipe does. Like, that's more durable. It does stand up to pressure underground. So those are the two reasons we wanted to see the amendment that makes foam core waste lines not permitted underground. And finally, the last one that we had on this update of the code was to install an audible alarm for high water in places where there are pumps to pump sewage waste. And it's one of those things that it was in the National Standard Plumbing Code. So prior to 2017, it was required. But the International Plumbing Code doesn't have that condition in it that requires an alarm. And simply, it's like a float switch that will send off an audible alarm there at wherever that pump is. So if you have a basement that wasn't plumbed for a bathroom or a shower or something like that in your home, and you want to put that in and you need a pump to get the water from the shower back up to wherever your plumbing left the house before, you have to have a pump there. And what it is the water from the shower and the hand sinks and the toilets go into a tank, and it then is pumped up to the septic lines leaving your house. And to prevent accidental spills and overflows, if there's some problem with the pump, what this does is requires just an audible alarm. So there's a float switch inside the tank, and if it gets to the high water alarm, it just sends off an audible alarm that beeps locally right there. So it's not connected to like a big alarm system. It's really not very much of an impact. It's just a safety switch to prevent like an overflow and warn people that there's a problem with their pump. It's fairly common, like it's available on the market, and we've always had it. We just want it back in the code. And to get it there now, we have to use a local amendment. So that's what we're asking for on the last. So I don't really see these as being a tremendous burden. I think they're good practice and prevent, damage and expense in most cases.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of questions first. So you would say that the update or adopting international plumbing standards is what's known as current best practices, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I see that there's currently no fiscal impact for the city.
Correct. The inspections would not be any different. There's no different expense for us as a city.
Great, thanks. And for the homeowners or the residents, how do you feel that they would react to this? And has this, did this come from persistent, problems before?
Right. The issue with the underground foam core lines, we don't have much experience in Annapolis because they've never been permitted. So there's no track record to show where we've had a problem. It's only just recently, because of the code we adopted in 2017, that there have been like a plumbing contractor that said, I can put that in now. So they put it in, and we told them that we didn't permit it based on the local authority having jurisdiction. So we didn't have it in the code to say that we can't. We had to rely on the authority of the plumbing inspector, which is not a good way to go. We want this up front. We want it in the code so that everybody knows ahead of time. Contractors then can plan for it. A homeowner would have a long-term benefit, and they have a more durable product. The price difference up front to install standard PVC Schedule 40 versus foam core is very minimal. Okay. But it is a small price difference. How much per section of pipe, I'm not really sure. The actual labor of putting it in, exactly the same. For the waste alarm, again, we had that in the code. It was required before 2017. So everybody's used to it. I would say I just saw a specification come through. I think they're probably under $50 to actually include that. So if you're doing a bathroom renovation or something in your house, or if you have a septic pump for some other reason on commercial property, it's not a big expense. When you think of the overall price of putting in a pump, and like a sump pump like that pumps out all kinds of waste, we're talking $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, like if it's not too extensive. So the $50 price tag to go along with that $8,000 installation is really not a significant piece of it for the peace of mind of knowing that if something goes wrong, I'll get an alarm.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Manassa, thank you for bringing these necessary changes to our attention. I know it was a big step to last year when we made the changes, and it just shows how conscientious you guys are to keep us current. Is there warranty on the foam core product? Do they stand behind their product?
That's a good question. Most home contractors would give you at least a 1-year warranty. I don't know if the product manufacturer supplies a warranty in light of something going into the pipe to clean it. Like, that's where the problem would exist, is if somebody went in there with a snake to clean it and that damaged it. In that case, I'm not familiar with like whether or not a warranty would cover that. I've never experienced it.
There is no attempt to use that product in non-residential or non-business.
Actually, it could be used commercially, and that's the instance where we ran into the issue of it being used, was in a commercial facility. To name this facility in particular, I think it was the pirate ship facility over in Eastport that experienced the fire a year ago. That warehouse building where they housed their operation for the pirate ship in Eastport was the project that they were putting in all their new bathrooms, and they used the foam core pipe underground, and we told them we couldn't. So in their case, they took it back out, but it hadn't been buried or anything. Yeah. It was just the day's labor for the plumber to take it all back up and put the Schedule 40 pipe down. So they weren't really happy about it, but they went along with it. That's not a good way to operate.
So this addresses concerns from not only the residential community, but also business community.
It would impact both. It would impact both.
Last question is about the sewage pump what is it, alarm.
Yes.
How audible is that? I mean, does one have to be in close proximity? You know,
It's not loud. I would say it's probably about the sound level of a smoke alarm. It's not going to be something that you could hear outside. If it's inside in your basement and you're outside, you probably wouldn't hear it. If somebody's playing like a garage band, they probably wouldn't hear it. But most of the time, you would hear it. It's going to be like a smoke alarm.
so it would be in the residence, not
Yes.
out near?
No, it's going to be inside the residence.
Yeah.
Or I do believe there could be occasions when it would be outside. I believe we dealt with a house in Eastport that had the city's plumbing out at the street, which was too high, and their house was lower, and they needed to install a pump. Actually, it was a replacement. They had one before, but the replacement pump got, so their plumbing leaves the house and goes into the tank, and the tank pumps it sort of up the driveway to the city's sewer main. And in that particular case, the pump is outside, and the alarm is outside. But there again, it's not loud enough to really be heard off the property. It's still going to be the same audible level of about what a smoke alarm sounds like. But there could be cases like that where they're outside.
Okay, so is there anything to increase volume or some other detection system?
Yeah, it's one of those things where the owner would probably be aware that they've got that device. And if they heard it going off, they would know what it was. In the case of property changing hands over years, if you hear the alarm, I think you would know there's something going on that you need to investigate. But no, there isn't any particular way to make it more audible or less audible. They're pretty much standard, just alarms. They come as a pre-assembled piece of equipment.
I bought an alarm, a small thing that goes in my utility closet in my garage where the water heater and everything is. And I've often wondered if something goes wrong and that alarm goes off, if I'll ever hear it.
Yeah.
So that's precipitated my questions about it. Mr. Chair, I will move to give a favorable recommendation to 0418 with the 3 amendments.
Thank you, Alderman Finlayson. Did you have any questions?
No, everybody asked
Oh.
my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Great. All in favor of a favorable recommendation to 0418, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you very much, Mr. Manassa.
Thank you all.
Well,
Break after the Mark House.
Yeah.
I think we will have a meeting coming up, I don't know how soon, that will be far more exciting.
Yeah. And just for the record, I had reached out to invite Hollis Minor and Hope Stewart, as well as Brendan Greeley for the Economic Development Transition Team to present. Scheduling didn't work out, so they will be coming next month to present to us. Seeing no other items on the agenda.
Mr. Chair, let
Yep.
me ask a question. Is the process going to be that we invite these committees in before they present to the mayor?
I don't know what the process
Because
is,
normally
yeah.
the committees come in and present to the full council, or at least the mayor.
Yeah.
But we seem to be taking a different turn, and now we're hearing
Well,
Which committee?
the
transition
Oh,
teams.
So my understanding was that they will all be, all the transition, oh, sorry, not the transition teams, all the departments will always be presenting to us, especially the finance department, finance committee for the budget purposes on their goals and objectives. But in terms of the transition team, I'm not sure. I was just taking the lead from the finance transition team that presented to us at our finance committee meeting.
Okay,
So I don't-
so
yeah.
you're talking two different things now. Are you talking budget or are you talking about transition team?
I'm talking about, well, transition team, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So did you invite the economic development transition, is there an economic development transition? team?
There is, it's headed by a gentleman named Brendan Greeley, and I also invited, our economic development department, so Hollis Minor and Hope Stewart, but they weren't able to make it.
Okay. So my question is, and I don't know, maybe that you're not the right person to direct this to, but it seems to be we're dealing with these transition team reports in silos. Finance committee heard the finance committee transition team, and you're inviting the economic development or economic whatever
Mhm.
team in. So when does the full committee hear the full report?
The full council.
Well, when, I'm asking.
Yeah, that's a good question. We
I
should
know
ask,
it's a
we should
full
ask,
council, but
let's, we
when
should,
is that,
we should ask the mayor that, because that would be good.
Yeah,
'Cause that's-
because
that's-
usually
yeah.
that comes first
Yeah.
before you get into the details
a
in
good
the
point.
committee assignment.
So
So-
maybe around a work session or multiple work sessions.
Special session during our, during the work session. Because I imagine it could take up quite a bit of time to have presentations from all of them.
Well, traditionally, it is the steering committee that makes the report, not the individual committees within. Now, I'm not even sure whether there is a steering committee. So, anyway, but if you'll
Yeah,
check into
that's a good point, thank you, yeah.
what the format is going to be, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you. Any other items for discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, meeting adjourned.